Hello, everyone, and welcome to Center for Spiritual Living, Rogue Valley in Southern Oregon. I'm Kimberly Hawkins, Senior Minister and Spiritual Director here, and I'm so grateful that each of you has decided to join us virtually today or perhaps later this week. We are a radically inclusive, loving community dedicated to teaching spiritual tools to both transform personal lives and help make a world that works for everyone. If you're here joining us for the first time, a special warm welcome. We honor each of you, no matter where you happen to be on your own personal spiritual journey. It's my pleasure this morning to introduce our beautiful musicians, Anton Miserak and Laura Berryhill, with our opening chant.
So we're going to begin with a chant that's based on some Sanskrit text from Buddhism that talks about the empowering nature of mindfulness and how mindfulness makes us sovereign in our own lives. Ye Dharma, Hetu Prabhava. Hetu Prabhava, Hetu Te Sham Tathagato Hiyava, Te Sham Cha, Yonuro, Evam Hari Mahashramana, Ye Dharma, Hetu Prabhava, Hetu Te Sham Tathagato Hiyava, Te Sham Cha, Yonuro, Evam Hari Mahashramana. Hetu Prabhava, Hetu Te Sham Tathagato Hiyava, Te Sham Cha, Yonaroda, Evam Hari Mahashramana, Ye Dharma, Hetu Prabhava, Hetu Te Sham Tathagato Hiyava, Te Sham Cha, Yonaroda, Evam Hari Mahashramana. Evam Bari Mahashramana, Evam Bari Mahashramana.
And let us pray. So taking a deep, cleansing breath, allowing yourself to relax into the chair, wherever you may be sitting. Just allow it to hold you. As we know, metaphorically, the arms of the divine are always surrounding us, supporting us, lifting us. That one presence, that one power, that is the source of all in the universe. Ever present, ever expanding, and yet eternally the same. I know it as unconditional love, deep abiding peace, harmony, beauty and loveliness, order. I know it as unity, as oneness, that each of us is a unique, precious incarnation of that one life, never able to be separate from it. It is that power, that life that breathes each of us, supplies, supports, guides each of us, especially when we're willing to be mindfully present, to get quiet, to listen. And so how good it is this morning to remember that that is the only power in the universe, that despite anything going on that looks like chaos on this earth plane, and there is plenty of that right now, that the truth of our lives, the truth of the universe is oneness, peace, harmony, love. Love animates all. And so I know as we come together this morning, our intention is to remind us all of these truths. Remind us all of our oneness, to uplift and inspire us, to put into action that which we believe, to foster a world that works for all. There is much work still to be done, but I know that it is not just us in our human egoic minds that does the work. It is the divine as we allow it to move us, to guide us, to live through us as we become the hands, the voice, the feet of Spirit on earth. Everything can change for good. So blessing each one this morning, blessing those who have suffered racial inequity, violence, blessing those who are now standing up for freedom, for equality, for justice, blessing the world as we all begin to emerge from this pandemic, blessing our medical workers, those on the front lines, blessing each one doing our part, knowing God has our back. Spirit is ever present. And I just release this word in gratitude to be able to speak these truths, knowing that this prayer, as all prayers, has been heard and it is answered, and we say together, and so it is. Amen. Ashe. So, beloved friends, for our reading this morning, I've chosen excerpts from speeches of two illumined souls from the 60s, really, that spoke to some issues that we're still dealing with in our country today. The first is perhaps the most famous, the most important speech that Robert F. Kennedy gave. He was addressing a group of students in South Africa at Cape Town University in 1966, and these students had come together for a day of reaffirmation to end apartheid, which didn't end for almost another 30 years after this speech. But this is what Kennedy said in what's come to be known as his Tiny Ripple of Hope speech. He was the junior senator from New York at the time. Few will have the greatness to bend history itself, but each of us can work to change a small portion of events. It is from numberless, diverse acts of courage and belief that human history is shaped. Again, it is from numberless, diverse acts of courage and belief that human history is shaped. Each time a person stands up for an ideal, or acts to improve the lot of others, or strikes out against injustice, he sends forth a tiny ripple of hope. And crossing each other from a million different centers of energy and daring, these ripples build a current which can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., in his letter from Birmingham jail written to fellow clergymen in 1963, said this about hope and action. Let us all hope that the dark clouds of racial prejudice will soon pass away, and that in some not too distant tomorrow, the radiant stars of love and brotherhood will shine over our great nation with all their scintillating beauty. King, who was a master at distinguishing between the challenges of today and the possibilities of tomorrow, later said this 2 months before his assassination in Memphis. This is in February of 1968. We must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope. Turn now to Laura and Anton again.
Today we're going to bring you a new song, brand new, really brand new, that speaks a bit to that infinite hope and the uncertainty and the kind of more beautiful foundation that lies in the future and beneath it for us all. everything you'll find out. Nothing left to lose and nothing left behind. Nothing, everything you'll find out. Nothing left to lose, calling you to choose. Nothing, everything you'll find out. Nothing left behind, you will know you're mine. Nothing, everything you'll find out. Gate, gate, parasangate, bodhisattva. Gate, gate, parasangate, bodhisattva. Every heart in grace, and every being shall have its place. Every heart in grace, and every being shall have its place. Gate, gate, parasangate, bodhisattva. Gate, gate, parasangate, bodhisattva. Every heart in grace, and every being shall have its place. Every heart in grace, and every being shall have its place. Gate, gate, parasangate, bodhisattva. Gate, gate, parasangate, bodhisattva.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, you two. And Laura for writing that song for us this morning. Every heart in grace, everyone shall have their place. Our theme for the month of June is Mindfulness for Mavericks. And I've actually allowed that to be the title of my message this morning. And I think it calls for some definitions of terms first. So mindfulness, what is mindfulness? I saw a cartoon earlier that I posted on our Center for Spiritual Living Rogue Valley Facebook page that had mindfulness, mindful spelled F-U-L-L, or mindful spelled F-U-L. And the little bubble above the person who was mindful, F-U-L-L, had all kinds of clutter going on in that little bubble in the mind. You know, things, people, places, thoughts, worries, future, past, a mess. And the person on the right with the mindful bubble, F-U-L, had a scene from nature, very simple. Cartoon, 2 trees and the sun and green grass. And I think that really speaks to the difference. You know, sometimes our minds are full of chatter and worry and we're uncentered. But to be mindful, F-U-L, is to be completely centered, aware, and present in this moment. However, it includes being aware of our emotions, our thoughts, bodily sensations. So it's not a divorcing from all of that. It's being aware of that, but not being attached or pushing it away, having neither aversion nor attachment, but being centered here, right now. So many benefits to mindfulness. Research has shown, you know, it reduces stress, it increases everything from the ability to focus, to have our emotions be even, to have our decisions be good ones. It increases our empathy, our resilience, our creativity. So why would we not want to be mindful, F-U-L, rather than mindful, F-U-L-L? Now, maverick is a word that has two different connotations. It can be viewed as either a good thing or a negative thing. I looked up the derivation of the word maverick, and it comes from a wealthy Houston landowner in the last century named Sam Maverick. He allowed his cattle to freely roam without fences, and he didn't brand them. He refused to brand them despite the pressure that he was receiving from his fellow ranchers of the day. And so the word maverick came to be associated with unbranded cattle, or alternately to somebody who was unconventional, an independent thinker. Now, some define maverick as somebody who has a stubborn streak of independence. I would like, for our purposes today, to think of maverick as somebody who is committed not to go along with the crowd and groupthink, but to be mindfully aware and to be making decisions based on one's own thinking, one's own values. You know, I'm thinking of another use of Maverick. For those of you who saw Top Gun, the movie, Tom Cruise's character was nicknamed Maverick. And he was brilliant, right? He was a brilliant pilot, but he was also outside the box to the point of being daring in probably a too much sort of way. So let's take the meaning of Maverick to be somebody who can also be mindful, because that is, after all, the topic, mindfulness for Mavericks. Now, Buddhism speaks a lot and focuses a lot on the concept of mindfulness, teaching spiritual practices from breath work, focusing on the breath, to meditation, even meditation on things like a corpse, because we are called to be aware of everything, life and death, and not be in aversion or resisting any of it, to be accepting of all of it, to not be attached nor averse. There is a joke about the Zen meditation student who went to a monastery and asked the head monk, if I join the monastery and am diligent in my daily practice, how long before I reach enlightenment? And the monk said, probably 10 years. And the student went, oh, what if I work really hard? I work extra hard and really double my focus. And the head monk said, probably 20 years. So this idea of mindfulness is not about working hard. It's not about our ego and forcing things. It's about being still, being aware, doing our spiritual practice, being engaged with what is. There's a beautiful story in one of our books of the month. This month is Thich Nhat Hanh's The Miracle of Mindfulness. And I shared this on one of our morning spiritual practice calls this week. He talks about an incident where he's at Plum Village, where he lives in France. And he had a visitor from a friend named Chris, I think his friend's name was. And Chris came to visit, and the tradition was to eat dinner, and Thich Nhat Hanh would do the dishes, and then they would sit down and enjoy a cup of tea together. One night, Chris offered to do the dishes. And Thich Nhat Hanh said, well, that depends on the way you do the dishes, if you know how to do the dishes. And his friend said, what do you mean? You think I don't know how to do dishes? And Thich Nhat Hanh said, there are two ways to do the dishes. One is doing the dishes in order to get them clean, get them done. The other is to do the dishes in order to do the dishes. And Chris understood what he meant, to be present while we're doing the dishes. And so he agreed to do the dishes for that week. And Thich Nhat Hanh explained that if we do the dishes just to get them done and out of the way, and how many of us have done that? I certainly have. We're missing the miracle of life that we are able to experiencing right at that sink. We're missing out. And if we're rushing to get through the dishes so that we can sit down and have our cup of tea, we're likely not going to be present and mindful when we drink the tea either. We're going to be off thinking about the future and missing the present. So I think that's a beautiful example of what it means to be mindful. So what does it take to become a mindful maverick? Thinking about this topic, I realized that, at least in my view, both Buddha and Jesus were mindful mavericks. If you think about Buddha, who was born Siddhartha Gautama, a wealthy prince in an area of Nepal where he was pampered with servants and lessons, fencing lessons and swimming and music, and totally sheltered from the outside world. His father wanted that. Eventually married and had a son. And as the story goes, one day was able to sneak outside the palace walls against his father's wishes and saw three things that profoundly affected him. Siddhartha saw an old man. He saw a sick man. And he saw a corpse being carried to the funeral pyre. He is somebody who had died. So for the first time, he was exposed to illness and aging and death. And he vowed then and there to do explorations to explore the reason for suffering in the world. Now, I said he was a maverick. So what Siddhartha did was he left the palace. He left this rich, pampered life he had, went out, shed his rich clothing, put on mendicant's clothing for 6 years. He traveled with a group of ascetics. The story goes that he would eat hardly anything, maybe 1 grain of rice a day, trying to understand the root of suffering. And after 6 years, he gave up that practice, and he became a maverick again because he broke the rules that were part of his ascetic teachings, and his 5 companions abandoned him at that point because he was breaking loose. And he did other things. One of the things he did was sit in meditation. And the story goes he sat for 6 days under the Bodhi tree until one morning, with the appearance of the morning star in the sky, he reached enlightenment, spent the rest of his life teaching. And most of those mendicant ascetics came back to him. I think one of them had died, the teacher had died, but they came back. And so this beautiful, mindful maverick who had such an impact on the world, right? Now Jesus, look at Jesus' life. A few things that came to mind were, at 13, I believe it was, Jesus went into the temple and overturned all the tables where the money changers were set up in the temple, saying they had no place to be there. He was a maverick at a very young age. Later on during his ministry, Jesus would heal on the Sabbath, which was something that was against the laws of the Jews at the time, and he was deeply criticized for that. But he was teaching and healing according to his values of compassion and service to others. Jesus frequently, we're told in the Bible, went apart, meaning he went into a place of solitude to pray, to meditate. And that was a part of his being mindful. It says in the Bible, he told his disciples, when you pray, go into a room alone, close the door, pray to your Father in silence. So these 2 beautiful spiritual teachers who have affected the entire world, I believe, were mindful mavericks. Coming to the founder of our philosophy, Science of Mind, Ernest Holmes, I believe he too was a maverick. Now, he studied all the world religions, and he didn't believe in teaching a particular dogma that would never change. He didn't believe there was one true world religion that you'd be saved by. He synthesized the golden threads of wisdom that run through all world religions. And he believed there was one God, many paths. He put his beliefs into practice in 1945. Now, mind you, think about 1945, post-World War II, pre-Civil Rights Act, right, where there was segregation still a common practice in this country. The Science of Mind magazine used to print a list of centers or churches in the greater LA area at the time, and they listed them alphabetically. Well, East Side Church was the first to be listed because it came first in the alphabet. But there was some controversy at the time and some gossip going on. The Reverend J. Arthur Twine was the African-American pastor of that church. And the congregation was very integrated. It was half black, half white. And a lot of people didn't like that. So in the midst of this controversy, the Science of Mind magazine one month printed the list and took East Side Church from the top of the list and put it at the end of the list with a little asterisk saying, in parentheses, colored. They segregated the list. When Ernest got wind of this, he asked his friend Arthur Twine, Reverend Arthur Twine, if he could speak that week at the church. And this is what Ernest said to a hushed, packed house that day. True, there are Caucasians and non-Caucasians in this congregation, but this we must affirm. We are all children of one living God, one life that permeates all without exceptions. One intelligence that governs all, and most important, every man and woman who abides in the universe is a significant entity in the one universal consciousness. Our doors will forever be open to all. Whoever you are, be proud. You are a divine idea in the mind of God. After that lecture, the magazine immediately reverted back and put East Side Church at the top of the list again. And as this commentator wrote, somebody had briefly bowed to the segregationist conventions of the day, only to be reminded that Ernest's teachings were anything but conventional or exclusive. A mindful maverick who again took a step, perhaps a small one, but a step to change the status quo. So traits of a maverick include strong convictions, a belief in their own vision, an idea of what the world could be, the ability and the courage to challenge the status quo, which all of the people I've mentioned, Buddha, Jesus, Ernest Holmes did, and an acknowledgement of a superpower, if you will, to make a difference. Ernest Holmes used to start his radio addresses, there's a power in the universe and we can use it. So when we are mindful mavericks who decide to take action in the world, we don't need to do so as individuals on our own. We do so with this power that I prayed about earlier, this power that is a power of unity, of oneness, of unconditional love. And it supports those actions when we dare to do them. So there's another young woman that I wanted to speak about today, and I actually learned about her. I want to give credit to Reverend Shannon O'Hurley, who is the senior minister at New Thought Center for Spiritual Living in Portland. She spoke about this young woman last week, and we'll see her picture up here in a minute. Her name is Bree Newsom. And to give you a little background of how Bree took action as a mindful maverick, we have to go back to the year 2015. I know all of you will remember the massacre that happened at the AME Church in Columbia, South Carolina, when a gunman came into the Bible study and shot and murdered 9 African Americans. One of those people who were murdered was a state senator, the Reverend Clementa Pinckney. And you also may remember that it was President Barack Obama who spoke the eulogy at Reverend Pinckney's funeral and sang Amazing Grace. I will never forget that moment. Now, the flags in the area were running at half-mast. I guess you should say half-staff. Both the American flag and the state flag were flying at half-staff in memory of those who had been massacred. The one flag that was not flying at half-staff was the Confederate flag, because there were laws on the book in South Carolina at the time that said that flag could never be hung at half-staff. Now, a little more background. Bree Newsom was aware that the killer not only had the Confederate flag on his truck, but his website had pictures of him posing with this symbol of racial hatred and violence. The people after this massacre were debating in the legislature, changing the laws to get rid of the flag that flew over the state capitol at the time. While the white people were talking and debating about this, Bree Newsom, at the age of 30, joined a group of activists, and in the next picture you'll see that she climbed a 30-foot flagpole. Now, she was a mindful maverick. I'm told, and it's read, that as she took that flag, and the police were below telling her not to remove the flag, she was arrested later on. What she said was, in the name of God, this flag comes down today. As she descended, carrying this symbol of racism in her hand, she recited the Lord's Prayer. About 2 weeks after the funeral and that incident of the flag being taken down, there was a law passed in South Carolina to remove the Confederate flag from flying there, and it is no longer there. Asked why she and her fellow activists removed that flag, Bree said, "Because we can't wait any longer." We can't wait any longer. And thinking about those words, my friends, as I read the words of Robert Kennedy, as I read the words of Martin Luther King Jr., I realized that I imagine that's what they're thinking, and I imagine that that's what we all should be thinking right now. We can't wait any longer. We need to become mindful mavericks. We need to take action, whatever it is we're called to do individually. And that doesn't necessarily mean great things, as Robert Kennedy said. It can be small things. 2 suggestions, or perhaps 3, I would encourage us all to redouble our efforts, not like the guy, the Zen student who wanted to, forcefully reach enlightenment, but redouble our efforts in our spiritual practices, to become aware, to do meditation, perhaps journaling. There is a resurgence in awareness among white people, especially after the death of George Floyd, which was so visible, in the need to make changes here. And I'm happy to report that a lot of the books on becoming aware of white racism are now sold out, which is kind of cool. It makes it difficult for those that are doing book studies. So I wanted to tell you of many possibilities right now. We're going to be doing a book study on a book by Layla Saad called Me and White Supremacy. And it starts this week on Wednesdays on Zoom. All are welcome. If you email me, I can send you the link. We'll be meeting for 6 weeks. And the subtitle of this book is beautiful. It's Me and White Supremacy, Combat Racism, Change the World, and Become a Good Ancestor. We focused in Science of Mind lately, even the whole year last year, on this idea of socially, it's spiritually motivated social engagement. I was on a call on Friday that CSL sponsored. It was a call about reimagining spiritual community. And it was a 3-hour call. Part of it included a panel of interfaith clergy and one statement by a man who is the senior minister of Unity of Sacramento. His name is Reverend Kevin Ross. He said, I think we need to move now from teaching theology to beology. And his definition was, in our terms, in Science of Mind terms, we teach spiritual principles. But we need not only to teach spiritual principles, but to make sure that we're applying spiritual principles in the world. The beology is making what we believe be visible in the outside. We talk about as within, so without. If there wasn't internalized racism present within each one of us, we wouldn't be seeing the overt acts right now. And I don't say that to guilt trip anybody. It's a systemic system that we didn't choose consciously. But if we truly practice our theology, we will put it into practice as a beology, and we will truly be able to create a world that works for everyone. I think it's important for us to remember that, to have hope coupled with action. As Jesus said, faith without works is dead. It doesn't mean much. So setting intentions, being aware of our thoughts, being aware of our feelings, and setting intentions, which we know in our teaching can truly, truly change everything. Everything. There's a quote from Bree Newsom that she stated in a speech she gave well after that incident. She said this, one doesn't have to be a frontline activist. Everyone in the community has a role to play in transforming our community. Everyone must ask themselves, what is at stake in these times? I think everyone needs to ask themselves, what is mine to do? The title of a Facebook group sponsored by our amazing practitioner, Tracy Brown. What is mine to do? I thought as we bring this talk to a close that we would do a little ritual this morning, a meditation, speaking of mindfulness, because I think part of what we're called to do as mindful mavericks is to feel the pain, the collective pain, not to gloss over it, but to feel it, not to resist it, not to shoot it under the carpet. And I'm well aware that there was another murder Friday night of a black man who had no lethal weapon, had a taser in his hand. And so I want to call us, as I light a candle, in memory of some of those who have recently died due to racial hatred and violence in this country. As we do this, I invite you to go within. And I'm going to read the names of the most recent victims of racial hatred that we're aware of. Mind you, there may be many others. There undoubtedly are many others we're not aware of. So in reverence for these lives, and in the intention and hope that these lives light the way to us all becoming mindful mavericks, to us all being still enough, guided enough to know what is ours to do, as Bree Newsome encouraged us to do. And so we honor the lives right now of 17-year-old Trayvon Martin, shot by a neighborhood watch volunteer in Sanford, Florida in 2012. We honor the life of 18-year-old Michael Brown, shot and killed by police in Ferguson, Missouri in 2014. We honor 37-year-old Alton Sterling, killed by police in Baton Rouge, Louisiana in 2016. We honor 26-year-old Botham Jean, killed by police in Dallas, Texas in 2018. We honor 28-year-old Tatiana Jefferson, fatally shot in her home in Fort Worth, Texas by police in 2019. We honor and remember 46-year-old George Floyd, who died of asphyxiation under the knee of a Minneapolis police officer on May 25th, 2020. And we honor and grieve the life of 27-year-old Rashard Brooks, who was killed this past Friday, June 12th, in Atlanta, Georgia, by police. Rashard Brooks leaves behind 3 young daughters. The oldest one turned 8 yesterday. Her family attorney said she had on her birthday dress yesterday morning, waiting for her dad to come pick her up to take her to a skating rink to celebrate. Her dad never came. Her dad will never come home to his family again. So let us take a couple minutes now to honor the deaths of these individuals and all of those who came before them, as we look at our need not to wait anymore to end this senseless violence. In reverence now, in memory, we go into stillness.
shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We are not afraid. We are not afraid. We are not afraid today. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We shall all be free. We shall all be free. We shall all be free someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We shall overcome someday.
We are not afraid today. We walk hand in hand today. Today I see white, black, brown, people of all colors coming together to protest, to stand up, saying we can no longer wait. There is a God, a spirit, a life that lives each of us, that guides each of us. It is love. It is brother and sisterhood, spiritual siblings. We walk together. We march together, hand in hand, metaphorically perhaps during COVID, but we are not afraid today. We shall overcome. And we start now, for there is that power within that guides each of us. And if we're true to it, if we get still enough to recognize it and listen and be guided by it, we stand up for justice. We stand up for equality. We stand up for freedom. And we know that none of us is free unless all of us are free. We have that power, that source on our side. It lives and breathes us and guides us if we allow it to. I know that we are each called in our own way to become mindful mavericks in a tradition that dates back to the Buddha, to Jesus, to Martin Luther King, to Bree Newsom, to all the civil rights workers, to all those who have lost their lives, and to all of those who have stood up and continue to stand up. Today is the day. Now is the time. We are the ones. As the Dalai Lama, His Holiness, the Dalai Lama said, it is not enough just to be compassionate. One must act. And act we are doing, guided and led in a mindful way, a way where we understand we're one, that we come from love, that we insist on peace, equality, and justice. we insist on making this country great the way it was meant to be. In gratitude to know that we are supported beautifully, powerfully by that presence of divine love within, that we can make mistakes and still move forward, not afraid today, overcoming what is high time we release from this country, the systemic system of racial hatred and violence, and replacing it with a system that honors all of life in its beautiful expressions. I am so grateful to speak these truths. I'm so grateful for all of those who are standing up right now. So grateful to speak these truths and for the heart of each of us united now across the globe. I release these words knowing they're heard, they're answered, and we say together, and so it is. Amen. So taking a deep breath, I invite you to do that with me. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you as well for continuing to support us financially. There is another spiritual practice we teach called sacred giving. And it involves giving of the good that comes in. First of all, being grateful and recognizing the financial good that comes in to our own life and being willing to share a portion of it to where we're spiritually fed. So I invite you now to join with me in an affirmation as I invite you, if you're able, to contribute to our spiritual community in the continuing work that we do. There are 3 ways to do that, which will come up on your screen. But let's just feel these words together. Divine love as me. Divine love as me blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, and all that I choose to circulate. As the Bible says, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. And so it is. Amen. So you can give on our website, on our Facebook page. There's a way to sign up for our e-newsletter list. We have an e-newsletter that comes out every Wednesday to keep you apprised of what's going on in our community. I'll remind you that we continue to do a morning spiritual practice call at 9 a.m. every morning on Zoom. We have that book study coming up Wednesday, Me and White Supremacy. There's another book study coming up on a lighter topic if you truly would like to study some spiritual principles in a lighter environment. The Dalai Lama Cat. Our practitioner, Laura Stewart, is doing a book study on the spiritual principles in this delightful novel, starting next Monday at 5:30 on Zoom. And there's a forgiveness workshop this coming Thursday, 6/18, 2 different times. If you look at our newsletter or our Facebook page, you'll see it, led by radical forgiveness teacher, Kathy Green. Forgiveness is another piece, I think, of the work that we're called to do right now. Forgiveness is something we all can be addressing. Forgiveness of anyone for whom we're holding resentment, hatred, and so on, or even in a lighter way, just resentment. So I think that's it for our announcements, aside from the fact that there is a prayer vigil, an affirmative prayer for justice and equality worldwide, happening tonight at 5:30 on Zoom. Actually, it's live on the Facebook page for Center for Spiritual Living Seattle. So if you go on their Facebook page, you'll see a link to join us in that prayerful time together. So I know it's time now to go to Anton and Laura again for our closing song. Thank you both for being here.
So in these times of big change, it's important to remember that each one of you is special and important in this creation of this new reality. So thank you. I love you, I bless you, thank you for being in the world. I love you, I Thank you for being in the world. I love you. I bless you. Thank you for being in the world. I love you. I bless you. Thank you for being in the world. I love you. I bless you. Thank you for being in the world. I love you. I bless you. Thank you for being in the world. I love you, I bless you, thank you for being in the world. I love you, I bless you, thank you for being in the world. I love you, I bless you, thank you for being in the world.
So, on behalf of Center for Spiritual Living, Rogue Valley in Medford, Oregon, I love you. I bless you. Thank you for being in the world, and thank you for being mindful Mavericks, taking poetic license just a bit from the beloved Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Let us know that the dark clouds of racial prejudice will soon pass away, and that in some not too distant tomorrow, the radiant stars of love and brotherhood will shine over our great nation with all their scintillating beauty. And as Robert F. Kennedy reminded us, few will have the greatness to bend history itself, but each of us can work to change a small portion of events. It is from numberless diverse acts of courage and belief that human history is shaped. Blessings, you all, with much love from us to you. Bye for now.